New free trade agreement means British cars, Scotch whisky, biscuits and ceramics will be cheaper to sell into Australia. British farmers who had concerns about being undercut will be protected by a cap on tariff-free imports lasting up to 15 years. Also under the agreement, Brits under the age of 35 will be able to travel and work in Australia more freely. Well, we'll speak to Laura Lowe in a moment. She's hoping that this new deal will mean that she can move back to Australia with her new British partner. But first, let's speak to the President of the National Farmers Union, Minette Batters, to find out her concerns. Minette, there were a lot of concerns from British farmers, weren't there, as this trade deal was going through? They obviously don't want the UK market flooded with a competitor's product like Australian beef or lamb. What are your concerns, though, about what has finally been agreed?
Well, I must say, firstly, that we welcome trading relationships with our Commonwealth cousins. You know, the Australia trade deal has obviously been at the forefront of these other trade discussions, but it has always been about constructive liberalisation. And I've worked with 3 different secretaries of state in DEFRA now, who've all prioritised having sensitive sectors. With Australia, it's beef, lamb and sugar. So we see a 15-year transition, but we have very, very little detail as to what that will actually look like. And Australia is a very well-developed trade exporter, if you like, of agricultural products. They have 22 agricultural councillors across the world. We have 2. So we really do have, and I keep on saying this to the Secretary of State and indeed the Prime Minister, we must start to put effectively boots on the ground across the world so that we are competitive with Australia, but also New Zealand, Canada, America and Mexico. To date, we are no further on with what those councillors will look like, or indeed the match funding for the farmer levy that Australia has. We are not receiving that either yet. So there's a lot that needs to happen to get competitive with Australia.
Away from the actual nuts and bolts of this particular deal with Australia, though, are you confident or are you hopeful that the ramifications for the broader Asia-Pacific free trade agreement that may come from it could be really helpful for British farmers?
Only if we've got what I just said in place. You know, these are technical roles. They need people over in these countries to make sure those markets are opened up. At the moment, we have 1 person out in China. You know, Australia has, as I said, 22 people. So that's what's needed. You know, Trans-Pacific is not just a given. You have to have people on the ground to do that work, and that is what we don't have. It's also a precedent deal. So with New Zealand in 3rd round of negotiations, Australia will create a precedent for how we trade. Now, you know, my focus has always been on driving our high standards of animal welfare and environmental protection across the world, and particularly with climate change. This is incredibly important to show leadership. And I just feel this has been rushed. I don't think anybody, including the Australians, quite understand the rush. Their media is continually saying to me, what is the rush about? So we wait to see the detail, but ultimately it leads to long-term liberalisation. And at the moment, we don't have the detail for what the 15-year roadmap actually looks like.
In terms of food standards, I mean, that is obviously a concern for consumers and for farmers as well. Liz Truss in the last short while has said that, for example, hormone-injected beef will not be allowed into Britain. We know that there are some concerns about hormone injections, pesticides and feed additives in Australia. I mean, are you confident that actually it can work the opposite way, that our high food standards could lead to potentially changes in Australia, which could affect animal welfare positively?
Well, only if we put it into the trade deal, which, you know, to date we haven't done. And I would say it is probably a bit late to be talking about it now. You know, Australia does have access to our market already. So, you know, they can produce to our food safety standards, but we are raising the standards here. There is a bill going through Parliament at the moment, a kept animals bill, that is looking to raise standards. We've banned live animal exports across a 20-mile stretch of the channel. Obviously, in Australia, you can travel animals for thousands of miles. So it's really about a fair and level playing field and making sure that our farmers aren't undermined, that we export more of what we're good at, and we make sure that British food is really accessible to everybody. I think on the back of COVID, people want to buy local, they want to buy seasonal. And, you know, we've got to be focusing on that, effectively, that buy British message as well as constructive trade deals.
OK, Minette Batters, President of the National Farmers Union, thanks very much. Let's now bring in Laura Lowe. Now, Laura, I can tell you, is desperate to move out to Australia. Hi, Laura. Thanks for joining us. So you are Australian. Tell us a little bit about your circumstances.
Yes, I am Australian. I moved to the UK when I was 10 years old with my parents. I do have a dual nationality, so I can stay in the UK, but since being here so long, I think it's time to go back home. And last year, I was supposed to go home. I had a plane ticket booked. My English partner had a visa booked. And 3 days before we were supposed to fly, Australia shut the borders. Unfortunately, I could have still gone, but I couldn't leave my boyfriend behind. So I decided to stay and try ride it out and hope for the best that the borders will open. But again, it's just a waiting game at the moment, and obviously his visa has expired, so I believe this new visa scheme will very much help.
Because it's quite an expensive procedure, isn't it, trying to get all these kind of visas. So from your understanding of this new trade deal, is it going to mean that when COVID restrictions are relaxed, you and your partner could move back to Australia for a while or even permanently?
Oh, yes, definitely. It's mainly on the cards to be permanent because he wants a new life, and obviously he wants to see some sun. And I've been with him for 4 years, so having a visa that can expand to 3 years would be a great opportunity, and also a great opportunity to other British people, because with COVID right now, I think everyone needs a break and also to basically live life, because I'm sure everyone has witnessed now that life is so short, and now it's time to just get on a plane to Australia and yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's lots of people who would love to do that with you, Laura. What does your partner think about it all? I mean, is he keen to start a new life out there?
He is, yes. He was very much devastated when we couldn't get on that plane. We quit our jobs, we moved house. I even gave up my pets, which was quite horrible to do. And yeah, it was very devastating. It played a part on our relationship, and yeah, we're staying strong, and I believe it's going to work really well.